I've been a lot of things, but actually I've never been an accountant. But I have been a volunteer. Speaking last is, I suppose, a blessing and a curse. I get to say the last word, but after today I feel a little bit like a lot of the things I'm going to say have already been covered. So maybe if you could just regard this as a summary of the good things about today. So, as I said, I've been a few things in the past, and one of the things I did was I worked for many, many years looking after the last fragments of the grassy ecosystems of southeastern Australia. These were the fertile plains that were taken up by the farmers and covered with sheep and wheat, and there's very little of areas like this left. In 2003, I moved to New Zealand and I came to an incredibly different landscape with very different animals and very different ecology and some very different conservation problems. But I was very fortunate that just down the road from me was the Tawharanui Open Sanctuary, which had just been formed by Auckland Council and a group of volunteers called TOSI. And ever since then, Tawharanui has been very much both my friend and my teacher as I've tried to come to grips with this new country. In 2010, Chris Gaskin gave a talk to TOSI about grey-faced petrel that he'd found flying around and even nesting at Tawharanui, and he proposed that we should start a seabird conservation program there. Now, at some point during that talk, he would have used the phrase ecosystem engineers, and while I admit that I knew almost nothing about seabirds, I knew exactly what he was talking about. So, Professor Towns might have this as some sort of baby Australian elephant, I think, but it's a bilby, and bilby were one of about 20 shoebox-sized mammals that used to live across the grassy plains of Australia. And it turns out that they have many, many similarities with grey-faced petrels. They're enormously prodigious burrowers, but for me the most important aspect was this nutrient cycling process that they assisted with. And in particular, I was concerned that from Australia I knew that where we didn't have these small mammals, we couldn't restore these ecosystems effectively. So it seemed important that we had these grey-faced petrels back at Tawharanui. So Rachel Buxton, in her very excellent doctoral thesis, outlined some of the key factors in restoring seabird populations in areas where pests have been eradicated. And the first one, as it's been alluded to, is the distance to a source population. Tawharanui sticks nicely out into the Hauraki Gulf. We have lots of seabirds flying around, and we've also got Hauturu just out to sea as both a source and a model. The second thing that's been identified as a key driver is social cues. We got around that by putting up 3 large seabird sound systems built by DOC, and these sound systems for the last 6 years have played seabird calls all night, every night, from prominent headlands around Tawharanui. And they were very successful, as you can see. Within a few months, we had attracted diving petrels, fluttering shearwaters, grey-faced petrels, and a host of other non-target species. The third thing that seabirds need is good soil depth, and that's simply so that they can burrow. But Tawharanui, like many places in New Zealand, had been cleared and grazed, and the soil was very compacted and hard, as Tim will testify. This is him practising his golf swing. Nest boxes were an obvious solution, and they've proved to be very effective. So, the proof of the pudding is the chicks, and we've had great success both in nest boxes and also in natural burrows at Tawharanui. And we can reflect on the success of that program with a graph that's doing just what Steph Burrell's graph's doing, and it's starting to hit that steep part as it's going up. The 27 figures are guesses, at least for the chick numbers, but it's a reasonably informed guess, and we'll confirm it tomorrow when we go out there. We also know that there's probably grey-faced petrels in lots of other parts of the park that we can't get to because they're too steep. So we've developed a mark recapture population study to try and assess that overall population. Megan Friesen came along and gave it some much needed scientific rigour. And since 2011, we've captured over 350 birds. And interestingly, only 4 birds have been banded from other sites out of those birds that we've been capturing. We're getting a reasonable number of recaptures. At the moment, the rate of recaptures against non-banded birds is about 40–45%, which would suggest either a very growing population or lots of visiting birds coming through, probably both. We're not just targeting grey-faced petrels at Tawharanui though. We've also got common diving petrel. This one took up residence 2 metres in front of one of our speaker systems, and their numbers seems to be increasing every year. And we've got fluttering shearwaters breeding both in natural burrows and in nest boxes. At 4 days old, this fluttering shearwater chick has clearly got the right attitude to life, and no one's going to mess with it. Both those last 2 species, we think we've got the only, or we had the first mainland breeding records in the Hauraki Gulf, possibly in a much wider area, for many, many decades. So far, all well and good. We've got some good species coming, we've got some good numbers, but there's just this lingering doubt in my mind, you know, are seabirds really going to perform that role that I'd like them to? And as usual, I look to Huturu for some sort of inspiration, and Matt Rayner's population estimate of 1 million Cook's petrels ringing in my mind, and I'm thinking, how much poo do 1 million Cook's petrel produce? So I asked Matt. He couldn't tell me. Amazing. But he did give me some really good clues, and I just want to stress that any errors in this are all mine, okay? But, you know, the clues he gave me were about things like how long they incubate for, how long till fledging, how many visits they make. We guessed how much a Cook's petrel poo would weigh, and also the altitude that they nest at. So we're only looking at the sort of top 2/3 of the island. The figure was pretty amazing. I actually asked Matt today, I said, what do you think the figure was? And he went, a couple of tonnes, maybe 5 tonnes. It's about 55 tonnes per year based on those estimates. And that works out at about 50 kilograms per hectare per year. Steph Burrell pointed me in the right direction. He said, you don't need to estimate these things. People actually do these sorts of studies where they actually measure it. So I thought, well, I don't know, is this too big a figure or too small a figure? So I went and looked at the literature, and it turns out that my estimate's right down the bottom end. So, you know, birds like wedge-tailed shearwaters, which are about the same size as a grey-faced petrel, up to 234 kilos per hectare. And about 50 kilos of that would have been pure nitrogen. Birds like noddies and gannets that nest on the surface or in trees can produce just phenomenal amounts of guano. And even discarded eggs from sooty shearwaters produce a very, very significant nutrient input into the ecosystem. So those wheat fields that covered my grassy ecosystems in Australia, they fertilise them at a rate of about 10 to 12 kilos per hectare. And you can buy 1 kilo of Peruvian seabird guano from Amazon for $40 online. So, you know, you can do the maths on that one yourself, but these seabirds are obviously potentially having an enormous input. So where do all the nutrients go? We've heard a little bit about this, and thank you to Chris for this really flashy slide. So the seabirds transfer marine nutrients from the sea to the land. It increases soil nutrients, increases plant growth, increases the diversity and numbers of invertebrates, and increases reptiles. And as well as that, we now know that percolation and overland flow and direct deposits also improves nutrients in coastal reefs. It's no wonder then that Matt Maitland, who's the Senior Ranger for Open Sanctuaries at Tawharanui, said this. He said, seabird recovery is critical to unlocking the biological potential of Tawharanui. And I think we can probably extend that today, and we could say that seabirds are critical to the biological diversity of the Gulf as a whole. 3 years ago, Chris had another good idea, and that was to form the Northern New Zealand Seabird Trust. And once again, I got on board. And I'm really pleased I did, because over the last 3 years, I've been privileged to be involved in some really great programs and projects. This one, and you've seen a lot of photos from this project, we were looking at how seabirds interact with recreational fishing baits and filming how they respond and watching their amazing ability to find food underwater. Burgess Island in the Mokohinau, you've heard that come up over and over again. It is a stunning example of seabird recovery. Pests were only eradicated from that island in about 1990, and since then both the numbers and diversity of seabirds has skyrocketed, and it is now a mecca not just for seabirds but for seabird researchers. And the Trust is very keen to improve facilities out there and continue to work on that area. I was one of the lucky volunteers that got to Tawharanui last year with Megan and her project too. And you only have to see a forest like this to really understand what you're talking about when you're talking about nutrient recycling. This is a forest of Bahutakawa with a Xeronema understory, and it's entirely fueled by Buller's shearwaters. And finally, what's very much the ultimate symbol of recovery and restoration, a bird that's come back from the dead. New Zealand storm petrel, the Trust is involved with a whole lot of groups and organisations from all around the world at Hoturu to help understand this bird and help make sure that its recovery continues. I can't help thinking now, I was out in the Gulf yesterday with Andre and we were trying to find some of these birds. And two things sprung to mind. One was how difficult it is to research these species, how little we know about them after all of the effort that's been put in. Every year we seem to learn a lot, but we're only learning a little bit more. And the second thing that sprung to mind is that, yes, this bird recovered after cats and rats were cleared from Hoturu, but how close were we to missing out? Maybe that's a lesson to us all, that we really need to take action when we can and as quickly as we can. Thank you to all the volunteers at TOSI. Thank you to all the people who have volunteered at Northern New Zealand Seabird Trust projects. And in particular, thank you to the people who let me use their photos and their ideas in this talk. And thank you to you, Tim, and the Hauraki Gulf Forum and the Auckland Museum. It's been a tremendous day. Cheers.